We begin our afternoon sessions with a presentation from two librarians at Boston College. Anna Kios is the Senior Digital Scholarship Librarian at Boston College Libraries. Her academic training includes master's degrees in Library and Information Science from Simmons College and in Music History from Tufts University. Her main areas of research include music criticism and reception studies of women musicians during the 19th through early 20th centuries. Anna's interests include exploring new ways of presenting research through the use of digital humanities tools or methods, and investigating platforms for open research and publishing. Open access research and publishing. She currently serves as Assistant Fiscal Officer for the Music Library Association and coordinator of the Digital Humanities Interest Group, which is also part of NLA. Anna's current research includes a book project about 19th century pianist Teresa Carreño and a digital project documenting Teresa Carreño, which documents and visualizes Carreño's performance career. And most recently, her data visualization work about the impact of IMLS grant funding found its way into an article in Cosmopolitan magazine on Donald Trump and libraries. I knew that was coming. Beth Sweeney is the Irish music librarian at the Boston College Libraries, where she served as the faculty liaison and content lead for the Seamus Connolly collection of Irish music from 2013 to 2016. As a member of the Public Services Department of the John J. Burns Library, her current work includes Irish music collection development, reference, instruction, and exhibits. She also advises on priorities for cataloging and processing of collections in the Irish Music Archives, assists with Irish Studies collection development for the Thomas P. O'Neill Library, and organizes occasional lecture recitals on Irish music topics on behalf of the Boston College Libraries. Beth received both her master's degree in Library and Information Science and her bachelor's degree in English from the University of Michigan. She joined Boston College Libraries in 1989 as a Monograph's original cataloger for the O'Neill Library. Once in Boston, she discovered a wealth of Irish and Scottish traditional music in the region and began to explore how a background in violin and piano might translate to a new music and dance environment. She studied Irish fiddle with Seamus Connolly in 1990, followed by formal coursework in Irish language. Upon joining the John J. Burns Library's Irish Music Archives in 1998, she oversaw collection development and assisted the Irish Studies program in developing the Gaelic Roots music, song, dance, workshop, and lecture series. She has recently added Celtic harp to her musical journey, having served on the organizing committee for the early Gaelic Harp Conference at Boston Conservatory in 2011. Their presentation is titled Providing Open Access to Irish Music, the Seamus Connolly Collection of Irish Music at Boston College. Please join me in welcoming Anna and Beth.
Thanks, everyone. So we're going to start by just telling you a little bit about what we're presenting on today. I'll give you an overview of sort of the major points that we're trying to make today, and then hand it over to Beth for a better, more detailed intro. So we're going to start by talking about the kind of history of this collection, where it came from, who Seamus Connolly was, and then going into the actual contents of the project as well as the digital infrastructure and how we built the project itself. We will also discuss some considerations that you may want to think about when you are also faced with a digital project, and then challenges, surprises, and things we learned along the way. We'll conclude by discussing some future work that we're involved with right now based on this project, and then conclude with some, I guess, final thoughts. So I'll let Beth go into the background and history.
Thanks. So the Seamus Connolly Collection of Irish Music is an open access digital collection. It reflects more than 14 years of collecting and organizing on the part of a now retired faculty member from Boston College, Seamus Connolly, and he was Sullivan Artist in Residence at Boston College for over 11 years. And this project, it began as his own personal project, and he envisioned, his vision had various iterations, but his vision evolved to a book with 10 CDs. and then eventually that changed. So it became a collaborative endeavor in partnership with the Boston College Library. So that's where our project team began in 2013. And some of you know Mr. Connolly personally. He's a very social person, and the collection reflects that because there are performances by over 100 musicians. He invited over 100 musicians, and then they were joined by some accompanists. So it's more like 130 when all's said and done. And he's a world-renowned Irish traditional fiddle player from Killaloe in County Clare, and he immigrated to the United States in the 70s and since became a U.S. citizen. He's also a National Heritage Fellow. In 2013, he received that award among other distinctions, and he directed Irish music, song, and dance at Boston College from 1990 to 2015. So that's a bit of background about who he is, and maybe a little bit about how the libraries came to be involved. And then, so Anna can give you the full digital picture.
Sure. And we encourage you to visit the URL that's listed here for the Connolly Music Collection. We won't be doing like a full demo today, so just, when you have a chance to explore it, we encourage you to do so. And as Beth mentioned, this was really a collaborative effort across libraries. So here are the departments that we engaged with during this project for the past about 3 years or so, 3+ years, when it launched in October. So as you can see, it really did take a lot of people in various backgrounds and expertise to make this happen. So as mentioned in the introduction, the collection consists of over 300 traditional tunes and songs, including both old recordings and contemporary performances, rare tunes and new compositions. And it was originally envisioned as a book project with accompanying CDs. However, due to a variety of reasons, including changes in digital publishing and content delivery, the project evolved into an open access digital collection. Moving from an analog to a digital environment introduces a number of challenges and requires a rethinking and retooling of the project as a whole. Unlike a physical book or recording, which exists in a somewhat fixed medium, the digital environment affords us the opportunity to explore multimodal publishing, creation and interlinking of content, metadata, and vocabularies, wider content distribution, and discovery. In order to take into account all of the project requirements, we drafted a project charter that outlined the project scope, its goals, audience, success indicators, as well as the technical infrastructure, the content, the project team with assigned roles, sources of support, sustainability considerations, and of course a timeline with deadlines. This kind of a document holds the project team accountable, but is also flexible and can be revised if some of the deliverables need to be adjusted or scrapped. These affordances also present challenges because a digital project requires a combination of technical skills that are not generally required when writing a book or even recording a CD. And very often these depend on close collaboration across departments, as mentioned here. In addition to developing and editing content, a digital project depends on an infrastructure that may include a hosted database or repository, a presentation layer, curation tools, and media players or viewers, amongst other things. And it must also, of course, adhere to metadata standards or schemas, web design and accessibility standards. It must be compliant, for example. And, of course, the long-term sustainability and preservation planning must go hand in hand with the life cycle of a project. So our Connolly collection is presented in Omeka. It's a platform that I think many of you have heard, maybe in past NEMLA meetings or MLA meetings. Even I think some larger organizations such as the ALA may have had Omeka presentations at this point. It's an open source digital exhibit platform or content management system. And we have Omeka sitting on our library servers. So we install everything on our own servers, and we have configured it to run using a Solr search, which is actually different than what your out-of-the-box Omeka works with. Omeka out-of-the-box works with MySQL. And we can talk a little bit more about why we did this later. So we chose Omeka as a platform for several reasons. As the project manager and digital scholarship librarian working on this project, I brought over 6 years of experience, back-end and front-end development work in Omeka. And this translated into a comprehensive understanding of how the content and metadata was to be created, curated, displayed, as well as a familiarity with the software and code in order to customize the platform and troubleshoot problems that arose. Use of metadata and controlled vocabulary was an important consideration, as well as the highly customizable framework that allows add-ons, including themes and plugins. Omeka is extensible, which enables us to use these add-ons that make it easier for staff to manage and edit metadata, or to interlink specific terminology or vocabularies, and therefore making it accessible and more discoverable. Portability was also one of the criteria in selecting a platform. Omeka has an API, which enables users to pull metadata from one repository to another if you enable an API. And it also allows users to output metadata directly from our site. So there's various formats, including XML, RDF, and JSON. And it enables project staff to easily export all of the metadata and content using a simple Python to CSV script. So these are elements that we really considered when we were choosing a platform. And as you can see behind me here, just very basic building blocks of Omeka. If you go to omeka.org, you can find more detailed descriptions and examples of how this works. But essentially, it's built on item records using Dublin Core. And each item in the collection, including for the Seamus Connolly collection, was devised as an item record. And so think of these as, these are the items or records in a repository or catalog. And then we created collections around these items. So you'll see later, if you were exploring the site or when we talk about some of the contents later, collections are songs and tune genres, so jigs, clog dances, and so forth. Exhibits are another building block of Omeka, and these can be created to curate and contextualize the items that you have in your collection. And then finally, simple pages that are just built on HTML allow you to customize and use as standalone web pages in your Omeka site. So our process for this project was to create our metadata in a spreadsheet. A spreadsheet allows you to really easily manipulate your data and to add more columns or rows, to double check and proof your work, and also to automate some of the processes. And Omeka allows you to then ingest your spreadsheet using a CSV import. So this is very compatible. We relied on editorial review. So one of our staff members, Nancy Adams, in addition to everyone on our project team, reviewed the site hundreds of times, maybe more, in order to make sure that we didn't miss any typos or that the functionality was really there. And in addition to hosting all of our content in Omeka, we also used SoundCloud, and we'll talk a bit about that a little bit later. And SoundCloud is a streaming audio platform, so we'll explain why we use SoundCloud. So as you can see behind me here, this is an example of one of the items in our Omeka platform. Mr. and Mrs. Ted McGraw. This is a tune, and it is structured as an item record. We have the audio presented at the top, and that is embedded via SoundCloud. And we customized the image as well as a lot of metadata in the SoundCloud repository as well. The story is a personal touch from Seamus, so each of these songs and tunes comes with his own story. And then we have the metadata below it, the creator, subject, publisher, etc., which we relied on Library of Congress terminology, subject headings, as well as some in-house metadata expertise in order to create terminology that may not have been found easily in Library of Congress or represented as we needed. We also included VF IDs, so you'll notice that next to Josephine Keegan, for example, there's a ID numeral and it says VF ID. We wanted to make sure that for those musicians who have authority files in VF, you could then be taken to their record and therefore further authenticate that this is really the same person. our audio metadata, although we hosted everything in SoundCloud, all of the files were created and included embedded metadata. So our digital audio preservation librarian, Jack Kearney, embedded the metadata using something called meta-edit. And so for each WAV file, he converted those to MP3s, but he made sure that there was descriptive, technical, and administrative metadata as part of each file, including the images. So you'll see that the picture of the rainbow over the bridge here is an image that was used with a specific set of tunes. And each set of tunes has a different image associated with it. Something to consider is that user interfaces for platforms such as SoundCloud, as well as devices that use apps, are not always in our control. And while the user interface may display metadata differently, embedding it in the original file will ensure that it can be retrieved. So that was also part of our kind of workflow and our thought process behind this. Each item record also includes a transcription, and so you'll notice that the transcription is visible here to the right, and it's sort of larger than a thumbnail size. If you do click on it, it will open up as a full-page PDF, and you can print it, download it, and save it as a file. And lyrics, when they appear, will follow the musical transcription, so there may be multiple pages there. We felt that transcriptions facilitate historical comparisons with older performances and provide an aid in learning. And so that was something that Seamus included with the original songs and tunes. The other part of the item records that you'll notice is song and tune type. So that's what we renamed collection as song and tune type because we are organizing these under these genres. And so each item will have a specific genre that it links to, where you can then find everything that's part of jigs. And we also have playlists. So each tune and song is accessible individually through playlists, which are built again in SoundCloud. And so we interlink all of the playlists with each specific item record. So there's a lot of accessibility, discoverability, interlinking going on to make it easier for people to just explore the collection. Omeka also generates a citation. So each item record will have a specific citation that appears on the page, which is great because you don't have to think about it. If you do want to have a specific citation style that you are using, you can tweak what the original code was to ensure that each citation will be formatted that way. Okay. So let's see. I think. I already mentioned SoundCloud. So this is actually the SoundCloud page, the home page for our collection, where we uploaded all of the audio and metadata to associate it. Metadata associated with each file. And we felt that in order to encourage sharing and reuse of the audio in the collection beyond Omeka, SoundCloud worked as a repository. It reaches a wider audience while, again, retaining the metadata that we had created originally, and some really interesting usage statistics that we can share show you that putting it in Omeka and then also in SoundCloud really does pay off, making this an open access collection. We had over 96,000 page views since October. And that's phenomenal. And just to give you a comparison, we had another project that launched in September or October of last year, which was also kind of a very niche area. It's a 14th century Franciscan antiphonor. So you have to be kind of really interested in that in order to explore it. And there were maybe about 12,000 page views since that time, up to last week. So this has been a huge hit around the world. And also, you'll see the stats here on the right from SoundCloud. We've had over 48,000 streams of the audio in SoundCloud, and then 154 likes, et cetera, et cetera. So statistics are very valuable. They do show you kind of who your community is that is using this, whether people are actually using it or not, and so forth. Okay. So I'll hand this over to Beth now, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about the tunes and actually play some for you, so you can enjoy the collection.
So we haven't spent a lot of time describing the content of this collection, and it's kind of it's taken me a while to get my brain around what it is. And it started off in Connolly's mind as a way to honor the legacy of musicians who gave to him so generously when he was a teenager and just starting out, and then subsequent to that too, the people who helped him and mentored him and shared their tunes in this oral tradition. And so that's kind of how that was how the project germinated for him, and that element is still very much there in the collection. He decided early on it would be too difficult to get permissions to play both the original source recording that inspired him for a tune and then the new modern interpretation of that same tune. That was kind of a formula that he used to build the collection, where he remembered a tune, or he had in his possession, or we had in his papers at the Burns Library a source recording of an older tune, and then he would share that tune with a contemporary musician and say, would you please listen to this tune and make your own version of it. So that was the process for about half, or a little over half, of the tunes in the collection of 300 plus tunes. So, but publishing those original source recordings would have been a big permissions process, and nobody was up for that. So, so the transcriptions for that segment of the repertoire, the transcriptions represent their way of representing the older tune. And the person who assisted him with the transcriptions, we would kind of take a first pass at the melody. So they're not, you didn't grab all the accompaniment or all the phrasing or all the ornaments or anything in the first version, but you do get a boiled down version of what the source recording would be like. And so people, then they get to listen to the newer recording. And some people are a little not sure what's going on at first, because they see, oh, it's not quite the same, the key might be different, or some of the nuances might be different in what they're hearing from what they're seeing. But then there are a few essays in the site that describe that. And then the collection also includes a number of more recently composed tunes and songs. So there's quite a mix. So this would be one of those historical nods. This is Mrs. Galvin's barn dance. Mrs. Galvin was a fiddle player born in the 1880s, and Seamus Connolly did hear her play in the 50s. And so he took some artistic license with tune names. So when a tune name wasn't easily found, he would often name it for the person with whom the tune is associated. In this case, the tune was collected from Mrs. Galvin. She's a big name in Irish traditional music. So this is Mrs. Galvin's barn dance, and there's a bit of information about Mrs. Ellen Galvin and links to some other tunes associated with her in the collection. And then I'm going to see if this will play here. This just the thank you. So that would be the recording that inspired Seamus to remember this tune, and then he shared it with his associates Kevin McElroy and Barbara McDonald Magone, and together they made a new version. And we have one more musical example for you. This Dunboyne Straw Platers was in the repertoire of Dan Sullivan's Shamrock Band. They were a big name in Boston in the 20s and 30s, headed up by Dan Sullivan, who was a classically trained piano player, and his father was a fiddle player, and he had a well-known band. So this is the record for one of the tunes associated with them, and this is a rather fast-paced version. And then a new performance of the same by Jerry O'Sullivan. So that's just a little bit more about the content. I won't dwell on any of these topics, but you're welcome to ask us about them. Rights, that was a big job. I'll leave it at that. The site is, if you think of a continuum of things that are online, static versus dynamic, we're more towards the static end. It's not, this isn't a site where there's a vision to keep adding to it. This is a snapshot. It's like a scrapbook, personal scrapbook of music, and a snapshot in time. But we found it useful to develop an editorial policy for when we receive corrections, help guide us on what tweaks we can make and when those are needed. And these are some points that came up. Figuring out what's realistic. Site functionality, there was a lot of back and forth about that. The different ways of presenting the audio. We had to think about indexing and really test that, and new scripts had to be written, especially for diacritics, to enable searching, because there are a lot of diacritics in the names. And then how to publicize this collection, because it's its own thing, and how is it different from the Seamus Connolly papers. And Anna has a few more points that she'd like to share with you.
I think Beth mentioned them, and I know that we're getting close to time, so I'm going to keep this short. But being flexible and taking risks, I think, is something that we're constantly hearing now about in terms of where the library profession is heading and what we need to do in order to keep up with everything. In digital scholarship and digital projects, you definitely have to be flexible. Things may arise, such as the issue between using the MySQL or the Solar Index. We initially started using the MySQL and realized that diacritics were not being captured properly or were not being searched because it wasn't configured. So we, after reviewing what kind of pros and cons versus MySQL and Solar indexing, we went with Solar because that was something that we were more familiar with in our systems department, because they are using that for our library catalog system. So those are some things that you just have to kind of go with the flow as it happens, and if you have the expertise, then move in that direction rather than trying to waste time, people's time and energy on something that we don't understand. I'll just go through this really briefly and then we'll wrap it up. Future work. So this is really exciting. As we were working on the Seamus Connolly project, I had started thinking about, well, what could we do with this network of musicians? Because there's a network here, there's a community, and linked open data and social network analysis is something that you may be hearing more about. I know that at the MLA meetings we've been talking about linked open data quite a bit, and in digital humanities world, social network analysis is also something that people are doing a lot of work around. So we are actually exploring, and at the bottom you'll see a link to a blog post that I wrote, so if you want further information or if you want to talk to me later, I can get into linked open data a bit more. So linked open data and social network analysis is something we're exploring with the Connolly project, as well as, of course, data preservation. Data preservation is something we built into our project plan. I had written a recommendation for what we would possibly do with this data, separate from the presentation layer, for example. And these recommendations are still being discussed and sort of something that we're going to come back to. We're moving in the direction now. We actually recently took our finale files and had them transformed to music XML. Thank you, Mike Cuthbert. And we're going to take those and now do some cleaning of the XML. So Jack and I will be looking at that in the next few weeks. So things of that nature where this content can be then machine readable and reused for scholarship. Just some quick snapshots. The relationship metadata we're looking at. This is a screenshot of how we're currently putting together our relationship information about the performers in the collection, and we're using various ontologies and comparing musicians' records with those that are in VF or MusicBrainz or DBpedia, for example. And this is a very, very basic skeletal network graph. So this is something that I created last year, or maybe even a year and a half ago, before we had all the data complete. So this is sort of the kind of the baby graph, and this will be very much larger and more interconnected now that we have all of our data completed. So just to give you an idea of what a network graph might look like. Okay, so I think that in conclusion, this collection has brought greater visibility to Seamus Connolly's work, of course, as well as that of the Burns Library and the Irish Music Collection. As you've heard, library staff spent many hours working on this project. We've shifted priorities to meet our deadlines and accomplish tasks, which was not always easy, but in the end we believe this project was an invaluable investment of time. For example, it has jump-started conversations with other Irish music archives, and it has provided learning and growth opportunities both through regular project tasks and challenges that have cropped up. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Beth?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you. And if we have time for questions, we'll take a few questions. And you're, of course, welcome to visit the site on your own and explore our other projects at the ts.bc.edu website. Thank you.
Deb.
Yes, I was just wondering, how did you make arrangements with SoundCloud, and were there any costs involved, or is it,
Yeah, so we did end up getting a subscription to SoundCloud because we had quite a lot of audio storage needs in terms of the 330 or so tunes. We had reached the maximum that was allowed for upload in the basic plan. So I can't remember now, it wasn't very expensive.
It's like $100.
It was $100 or so for the year to subscribe to the storage plan.
Unlimited?
I think, I can't say, yeah, I would say take a look at their specifications because I don't know off the top of my head. But it was sufficient for our needs. And we will say that SoundCloud, it was not built by librarians. It doesn't use metadata schemas that we're familiar with. So we had the metadata created using the meta edit tool that Jack is familiar with. And then what I found myself doing was actually writing Ruby scripts to then access their API and pull out and push all the metadata because things like diacritics disappeared or titles that were too long got chopped off. So again, be flexible because these things will happen. But SoundCloud overall I think has been great because of the mobility. People can just put it on their phone as an app and just go anywhere with it. And it really, based on statistics, we've had a lot of streaming from SoundCloud. So it's a great community kind of tool.
Has anyone looked into Alexander Street Press's project where they're looking for unique music to upload to their server as an option? I was just wondering if anyone had used it, talked to them.
One of our kind of tenets in the digital scholarship group is to make everything open access.
Right.
And to primarily use open source platforms and code.
Not. You have to subscribe to it.
Yeah, Alexander Street Press does have an open access model. The problem is it's going to depend on what happens to their database. If they get enough subscriptions to fund that, then they'll do it. But otherwise, not.
Right.
And they do have we actually have a current arrangement with them. And we're going to go in the 7-year model, so it's going to be subscription for 7 years and then open access after that. That's what right now they're pushing that one because that's the only one they think is reliable. But eventually, if it's successful enough, they may make it the open access option more widespread.
What formats were the original recordings in, and how much reformatting did you have to do, and does your archive retain those originals, or did they stay with Seamus? Like, were they real?
All the new performances came to us on CDs. The source record, there's only a smattering of the actual source recordings in the collection, and those were already in digital form when they came to us.
Oh, great.
But yeah, but that said, there is a connection with the Seamus Connolly papers, and there are notes saying you can hear more of this. Not that you would have to come to the archives, because sometimes you can get them by other means, but if they're published, that is. But we had already digitized the older formats in Seamus Connolly's papers, so those are all available for consultation.
So there were some recordings, I think you mentioned, that were on cassette, reel-to-reel.
Digital audio tape, yeah.
And those had to be converted to digital media.
That's all done.
Yeah. Yes?
Yeah. How is this project represented within your discovery system with EC? Are the records exposed at the item level, or is it as a collection level? I mean, how could you search your impact?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we have initiated with our digital scholarship projects is to make sure that at the very least, each of the digital projects can be searched and located within our catalog. So this will be a test. There it is. Yay. Oh, there it is. Okay. It's not a book. It's right here. So there's a record. That's not it. Hold on. Sorry. The next one. Those were the papers. And this is the digital collection. Oh, that's interesting. There was a record.
Yeah, there should be a link to the.
Why is it not coming up?
There's a catalog record. Well, maybe it's Irish music needs to be in there.
Ah, that's right. There it is. Okay, I knew there was a record. Yeah, so basically our metadata librarian creates a record in Alma for each of the projects as a whole. When we are hopefully ready to move with our data preservation in the next few months or so for the project, we are looking at putting all of the content in some formats, right? Whether it's XML or music XML, the WAV files, we have to decide whether it's going to be MP3 or just, original raw files. I don't know yet. Those will be in probably our Fedora, Islandora repository. But this is a conversation that's ongoing. There's no one way to do this yet, and nobody is really in full agreement as to how to proceed.
I received a related question over lunch from Maggie, and I ran a test, and there are a lot of, you can search in Google or wherever, and you can search for a tune that way, and you'll jump right into the collection. So that's working.
Yes, that's a good point. The Omeka sites for this project and any other digital project that we do, we allow them to be indexed and crawled by search engines, so you can find it on Google.